Tonight's episode of Shockwaves is brought to you by Severin Films, offering high-quality DVDs and Blu-rays for the horror, exploitation, and sleaze connoisseur. Coming on February 20th from Severin, the infamous cannibal movie Eaten Alive, now fully restored in HD for the first time ever. 8 years after the first unleashed the Italian cannibal craze, spaghetti splatter master Umberto Lenzi, Nightmare City and Cannibal Ferox, returned to the jungle for this graphic gut muncher that still packs the power to rip your dick off. Euro Sleaze Hall of Famers Robert Kerman from Cannibal Holocaust, Jenna Agron from City of the Living Dead, and many more iconic faces star in this insane assemblage of flesh-ripping mayhem. Eaten Alive is now presented uncut, uncensored, and fully remastered in HD for the first time ever, with all new special features that slit open the legacy of this definitive cannibal classic. Also available is our Eaten Alive dedicated set, The Canna Bundle, featuring our special Eaten Alive Blu-ray release with a limited edition slipcover, only 2,500 available, CD soundtrack, an Eaten Alive t-shirt, and a special Umberto Lenzi enamel pin. Visit www.severin-films.com today, or check them out on social media. And don't forget to also check out their amazing titles like the new Amicus release and our favorite, The Devil's Honey. www.severin-films.com.
Today's episode of Shockwaves is also sponsored by Shudder. Brought to you by AMC Networks, Shudder is not only a premium streaming video service, but an experience unlike any other. Created for fans of all degrees of thriller, suspense, and horror, Shudder is home to the largest and fastest-growing human-curated selection of high-quality, spine-tingling, and provocative films, TV series, and originals. And there's always something new and unexpected for Shudder members to explore. Premiering on Shudder this week is Mayhem, Joe Lynch's thrilling action-horror-comedy hybrid. When a law office is hit by a virus that causes its victims to act out their most violent urges, a recently fired employee uses the building's quarantine as an opportunity to strike back at his company's heartless executives in this sharp, violent satire of the corporate world. Starring The Walking Dead's Steven Yeun and Ash vs. Evil Dead's Samara Weaving, Mayhem is declared fantastically creative, subversive, and Tarantino-esque by the Chicago Sun-Times. Mayhem is now streaming only on Shudder. Shudder is available for $4.99 a month or $49.99 with an annual membership, but our listeners can get a free month by entering the promo code SHOCK at checkout. Go to Shudder.com today and find the best collection of thrillers, suspense, and horror available stream anywhere.
Have you bought your tickets to Texas Frightmare yet? The Shockwaves gang is going to be there and you don't want to miss it. Just announced this week, Charlie Band is going to be a guest. Other guests include Clive Barker and several of the original Cenobites, including Doug Bradley, Katie Featherston, Steven Weber, Shawnee Smith, Tobin Bell, Matthew Lillard, Darren Lynn Bousman, Ron Perlman, and many more. Plus, there will be screenings, parties, and a live Shockwaves. Don't miss this horror convention. Go to www.texasfrightmareweekend.com and get your tickets now. Come out and celebrate Women in Horror Month at Phoenix's Film Bar. This February, Film Bar is showcasing and honoring the works of women in horror with screenings such as Girl Walks Home Alone, The Love Witch, and Pet Sematary. In addition to coming together to commend the female voice in horror, we will be supporting some special nonprofits as well. Planned Parenthood, Fresh Start Women's Foundation, and the Stephanie Rothman Fellowship for Women in Film, sponsored by Shockwaves, continue to make a difference in the lives of women. $3 from every ticket sold will be donated to one of these organizations. Unite with us and make a stand for female empowerment through film. Check out Film Bar in Phoenix for more information.
Okay, and welcome to episode number 83 of Shockwaves. I'm one of your hosts, Rob Galuzzo. I'm sitting here with Mr. Elric Kane.
Man, we've done this a few times.
We've done quite a number of... We've been around the block.
We have been all over that block.
Several times over the course of the last few years. With us on that block.
Yeah.
Hi, guys.
For better or worse, Rebecca McKendry.
I'm Becca on the block.
Becca on the block is stuck with us.
And noticeably absent around the block, which is becoming kind of a regular thing here.
Turek has left the block.
Hey, he tried. He really wanted to be
He did try.
Duty calls, and I want him to make that movie good. So,
did you want him to make that movie good, or do you want to hear his Cloverfield thoughts? I mean,
You know what? I am disappointed about that because
true.
I was getting a sneaky suspicion that he was going to be one of the defenders, which would be absolute fucking lunacy quite frankly. I'm going to curse
But
right
from a-
off the
from a
bat.
Right off the bat, fucking lunacy,
From a
man.
mom and dad hater, I could see it. I could see that coming. Nothing surprises me from him anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
not
I
here to
will
defend
defend
himself.
parts. Of the
Okay. Are we going to
Cloverfield.
jump right into this right
Are we
now?
just
Or
going
is
in?
Clover-
Let's go
All
all
right.
in.
So,
Going
okay.
in. Okay.
So for
Cloverfield Paradox.
For the uninitiated, I will say this was probably the most exciting, interesting, and unique drop of all time. One of the greatest gimmicks that I've seen in because these days it's almost impossible to not know about a movie being made or get all these trailers and previews and spoilers and all kind of stuff. But during Super Bowl Sunday, which of course I don't pay attention to anyway, apparently there is a trailer for the Cloverfield Paradox.
Yep.
Originally, what was this called again?
I don't
Only
know.
Cloverfield forgives.
Cloverfield told me to.
I will look it up. I know it's got another name, but anyway.
it did say coming soon. That's all it said at the end of the trailer. And then I think I straight away texted someone saying, wait, that means it's coming like today.
Yeah.
Yes.
then
And
everyone was freaking
so within moments,
God Particle.
God
it was
Particle.
made as God Particle.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Which actually makes sense. But as soon as the trailer aired, you started seeing things go up on Twitter about it already being available on Netflix. So it was like a really trippy moment because you just watched the trailer gets you all hyped, and then literally it's like, holy shit, it's already
as soon as
here.
the game ended, it was going to be there.
Yeah.
It wasn't available till
And
the
there
game
was
ended.
already, I went on Netflix and it was already on the main page saying, watch it after the game.
Yeah.
Like they already had the trailer and everything all up and ready.
So say what you will about the movie. This is one of
And we will.
we will.
Yes. Oh, I know. But this was so exciting for me as like a marketing nerd when it comes to horror films, especially because like that's what a lot of my research has focused on over the years. This is so exciting because it's it's a game changer. It really is, because it's utilizing kind of the standards and practices of old school movies where they immediately, you have the big flashy trailer that airs on, terrestrial network television, but then it's for VOD. This is like a completely different game. And especially the idea of the trailer airs and you can watch it in 10 minutes. It made it more of an event. And the idea of like a viewing event is something that has been absent from VOD up to this point, unless it's like the Stranger Things, the date that Stranger Thing airs.
Yeah.
But this even kind of upped it even more, because we've had, when you had network television, you used to have these events, this like, today at 8:00, you have to tune in and everybody's going to tune in all at the same time. That's absent from VOD.
That's true.
And so this kind of almost brought it back.
And it's great for studios because it's like, hey, we've got this giant film we put a lot of money in. It sucks. And
I'm not going to tell you it sucks.
And we can create
But
a
you can
market.
watch it
No
now.
one's reviewed it. We can make it an event. Everyone's going to watch it at once.
everyone did.
Success.
And everyone
Yeah.
did.
It's apparently it was already in profit that first night.
Wow.
That's the
Completely
okay.
believable.
So now let's jump
And in
into
profit, do you mean like because people are subscribing to Netflix who weren't because they're excited to see it, or how does
It's
that?
either that or
wonder how that
I'm
works
not sure. Like, look,
on
I don't
Netflix.
know specifically. I am under, and I don't know if I'm supposed to divulge this, but
Yeah.
like, I know different streaming services. They literally, you make money per second that the film streams, meaning like you get like whatever, a penny a second for whatever it is. But if there's millions of those happening at the same
Yeah.
time, it all adds up, and so from what I understand, it was a very lucrative deal that they had been negotiating. And I was excited. And in
yeah.
fact, I'd say my excitement was pretty up there still while I was watching at least the first half. I was really, really into it. And then somebody on our group had posted, which I thought was freaking hilarious and totally accurate. They're like, man, Paramount just pulled some Kurt Russell and used cars level salesmanship to just pass this lemon on us.
Yeah.
And I always love a good Kurt Russell reference. So I was like, that is very accurate. Not only that, my good friend Josh Miller, who I said I would quote, we were talking about it that night, and he's like, because he also hated it. He's like, it's like someone watched Life and thought, I wish this was less scary and made less sense.
Yeah.
And because it did have a lot of similarities to Life.
It did.
And a little bit of Event Horizon. There was a few different ones.
Event
running
Horizon.
around.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it felt Event Horizon at moments. And I was telling Rob before the show, it felt Pandorum for me, where it was like that, some type of space madness, but we're in space, so we don't know what's going on and anything is possible. It functions the same way as Phantoms to me, where the first half of the movie, I am going, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but this is brilliant.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you find out what's going on, I was so let down by it.
Yeah, that's a very accurate, because the opening of Phantoms is great.
Yeah,
Oh my God, the first part
really
where they're
great.
in the town and they don't know what's going on and there's weird music and voices coming out of the drains and weird shit appearing places. It's wonderful. And then the talking dog shows up and I'm just done.
There's also quite a distancing effect with this one and compared to the others. And it's always hard to compare these. But both Cloverfields, and I like both of them. I love Cloverfield Lane. I like the original. Both of them do the same thing. And this one doesn't. And that is you ground a film in complete reality of everyday life. And then you lead us into some sort of horror or strange thing. And that's fantastic because it's it pulls us in. This takes us to fucking, it might as well be an episode of Star Trek. It feels so distancing and fake and futuristic and like in the ways that first episode of Black Mirror, the new season, like just nailed. Like they did the whole Star Trek kind of spoof almost, and they crushed it. It's like doing that, but serious. And you're like, oh God, these are serious characters. And it's just such an uninteresting world. And I like sci-fi. It's just that it doesn't. And then to try to take you into the humanity, I feel like that reverse engineering is the biggest problem for me at the start.
Yeah. For the end of it, like again, for the beginning part, you've got all of this. It's really surreal because they don't know what's going on, but there's just really weird shit going on where things are appearing out of nowhere and it's almost kind of supernatural.
Yeah, that stuff's actually fun, and I started feeling hopeful.
And I was really into it, but towards the end, when it just kind of became, I'll call it a straight action adventure. Like there was not much left.
But with no logic.
With no logic. But at that point, I was so much more interested about the world that they were above, where it's like, because they set it up, and this is like, you find this out at the very beginning, that there's all of the nations of the world are at war with each other and no one has electricity. And that's what this like space station's job is it's literally making electricity to power the entire country. And since the space station is down, the country has no electricity and now the countries are back at war with each other. And I was like, this sounds like a much more interesting environment. And I'm stuck in this spaceship with 5 people.
And it's technically a prequel to everything.
Yeah, I guess. But all right. So here's the cardinal sin for me is because I kind of enjoyed how weird and crazy it was. And the idea of kind of parallel universes or whatever, whatever kind of multiverse, whatever kind of weird thing has to happen to put your characters in that situation. I'm all in. I even kind of like the arm thing. I thought that was totally hilarious.
The arm thing was great. Even in the final moments when the arm came back, I was like, that's brilliant.
There's a whole gag with the arm, but then somewhere after that, from the midpoint where you're getting all these interesting threads and things hinted out, that's when I was like, oh, this isn't going to actually pay off at all, is it? None of this is going to actually connect or make any sense. And in fact, the only thing I'm waiting for now is something to do with Cloverfield because it's in the title. And no matter what, it's probably going to let me down, which it did. And so the second half then, and here's the thing, it's got a rich, diverse cast. Like I was like, oh, great. A lot of, some faces I recognized, some I didn't. I'm like, this is a cool, different type of cast than we're used to.
And that was explained in a way because they're meant to all represent different nations, which is nice.
Which is great. Yeah. And so I was all in. I wanted to be a fan. But at that moment when it turns, because, then all of a sudden it's just, nonsensical decision after nonsensical decision. They find a woman embedded in the wall for no explanation. And then they're like, we should trust her. Like, why?
But she's mean.
How does she have footage of Eva and her family? Like,
and she's literally evil from the start. There is never a moment where I was like, well, that character's warm and fuzzy. I'm going to trust her. She's like stone bitch from the very get-go. And yet everyone's like, oh, well, she must be telling the truth.
Well, and that's it. So there's that. And then what's the threat? What is the thing that's there? Like, there's these random deaths.
Yeah.
With no explanation. I'm like, well, all right, why is there like a water-filled room and is it a supernatural entity? Is it just kind of like, molecules fixing themselves because they, teleport? There's no explanation for it. And so at some point you're like, well, if there's going to be no satisfying explanation, then why do I care at all? And then, and again, it's almost like they threw you that bone for the conclusion, which to me felt more like a middle finger than anything. Cause now I'm like, you know what? I really want these creatures back in these movies. Like that's the movie I want to see. I don't want to see this shit that alludes to stuff happening in the background only for you to tease me for 2 seconds somewhere in the movie about it. Like, let's go to that movie again. Or make it as fucking captivating as 10 Cloverfield Lane. Because that actually doesn't need to be a Cloverfield movie.
Yeah.
That's just a great movie.
Yeah.
So.
But that has a connection to the end. And so this movie, though, as part of a trilogy, if we view it thus far as such, is just saying that the events of the ship are directly what lead to everything.
Yeah, that's exactly what.
Which is probably also why it weakens the whole thing.
I saw a theory online, which, is probably accurate, but there's a theory online, and, forgive me for not getting the exact moment right, but they set off the test.
The bar.
They do the test 17, 18 minutes in, and 17, 18 minutes into the original Cloverfield is when the first attack happens. So apparently they even synchronize the time-wise for everything happens. But, overall, it just doesn't, it actually doesn't. It
didn't have a clear vision to it, the whole thing.
Yeah.
There you go.
And it's disappointing. It's disappointing. But you know what? Again, I think it's the greatest rock and roll swindle.
Yep.
And
it felt free.
The decade.
It felt free, which is nice.
It felt
feel
free
ripped
because
off.
they already have the fourth film is about to start shooting, which will be a theatrical film.
Okay.
And so, we'll see if they held on to that goodwill. But
that said, I want more giant releases like this, Netflix. I loved it. I loved the fact that it was such instant gratification of I have seen this on television and now it is in my living room. And I loved that. So I want some more of that.
Yeah. That's a nice feeling.
Yeah. All right. Well, we all saw that one. Who wants to go next?
Man, I scream.
Elric, what do you got?
Scream. I wasn't screaming for the ice cream man.
Ooh.
Is this the 80s one?
This is Clint Howard,
Clint
baby.
Howard. Okay, yeah. I think it's 90s, actually.
I actually called it the It Cream Man because it's basically all the best parts of It, of kids on bikes and Stranger Things, but obviously It for the time period it came out. Those parts are really quite good. There's parts where the kids are just kind of hanging out and talking. It just feels kind of fun, and feels kind of cheap. But the Clint Howard stuff as the kind of the psychopathic ice cream man it's kind of painful to watch, and my whole experience watching was it's not as bad I get why some people would like this one for sure, because there's definitely some fun stuff, kind of silly, a lot of it's pretty silly, but it definitely is coming back to that Microwave Massacre vibe I was getting. And you know how much I love that movie. Yeah. This is coming close. If this didn't have the kids stuff to at least kind of engage you because they're kids biking around and stuff.
And Olivia Hussey's in this, right?
Oh yeah, but unrecognizable. No, everyone's in it. It's got David Warner in a cameo.
That's
Olivia
right.
Hussey. Oh no, the worst is what's his name from Airwolf? Oh shit, what's the what's the famous actor who always was drunk and the mechanic?
Looking it up. Hold on. Oh, J. Michael Vincent.
Yeah, I do always talk about him on the show. Jan Michael Vincent.
Oh, from Extra 2.
Yeah, dude.
That's what you're going to pull out, Extra 2?
That's what I know.
For Jan Michael Vincent.
Is that it?
I've seen some painful... I've heard that guy was drunk in that film. This one is
very obvious.
It's basically he's with this other cop all the time.
Yeah.
A guy who no one's ever seen before, and the other guy does all the talking. And Jan Michael Vincent just stares intensely. And then one time a kid is in the back of a car, and the kid yells something suddenly, and Jan Michael Vincent just turns around and goes, "Shut the hell!" And the scene cuts, and you're like, did he just literally attack a child? It's really, because I really love his early work. I think he's such a good actor when he was young.
Side tangent. You tell me, because I've seen him in quite a lot of movies. There was, I love the original Mechanic with Charles Bronson stuff. And I worked on a disc called Demolition Alley, which he's lead in. Yeah. And I watched a lot of weird early action style movies that I've seen with them. But I don't get Jan Michael Vincent.
Yeah.
How did he become a thing?
I don't.
Well,
because he's kind of sexy.
He's not necessarily. Is he?
He was sexy when he was young.
I'm looking at pictures of him as young right now, and he's got this pecs and a square jawline.
He was a good-looking guy.
White Line Fever. That's a good one.
Yeah, he looks kind of Brad Pittish in his
John
younger
Flynn
days.
film we've talked about. I saw it at the New Bev a couple of years. Defiance is fucking
That's great,
and he's great in it.
But is he great in it?
I think he is. He's really intense.
Every time I see him, I don't think he's that good.
I think he's a really good actor, but he just
good looking. And I'm like, how did this guy become an action star?
If you listen to that 80s all over, Drew McQueen keeps talking about how he followed his career and how he became just a real drunk, and he was on the Universal set, and a tour, one of the Universal tours stopped the train, and they go, "Hey, and look, there's Jan Michael Vincent from Airwolf," and I guess he just starts urinating in front of her. I mean, it's really a bummer. But in this movie, it's particularly painful. This is just the kind of movie that it's this is somebody's idea of fun, but it is not my idea of fun. I can honestly say I did not enjoy.
Yeah, I've honestly never got. I know people have a lot of love for this movie. And I'm sorry, listeners, but I don't get Ice Cream Man either.
I've never seen it. I just always like the cover.
You might like it because of your Ticks love. Maybe there'll be a Clint Howard thing going on for you. I know he's kind of your type.
Some Clint Howard movies. Like, I like Evil Speak.
No, I like Clint too, and it's not his fault. It's just, well, okay, and Dick looked it up while we were watching. He's like, oh, big surprise. Every other movie this guy did is hardcore pornography. Like, it's by a director. Yeah, the director. It's all pornography. So that maybe is all you need to know.
All right, fair enough. Way to go, Vinegar
Ice
Syndrome.
Cream Man.
They keep this streak going.
Yeah.
Well, I will quickly lead with this one just because it's not horror, but it's a really interesting study on a horror movie. So I found out about this movie called The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother. And it was directed by Gene Wilder. And this was a direct follow-up to Young Frankenstein. And it was supposed to be bringing the insane cast and crew back together to see if they could strike lightning twice. And so it was Gene Wilder, Madeline Kahn came back, Marty Feldman. Gene Wilder wrote and directed it. And so because I'd heard that, they were trying to get the entire Young Frankenstein game back together, minus Mel Brooks, who I think he's a voiceover in parts of it, I was like, okay, I have to see this. It was quite possibly the worst movie I've seen in so long. But it's interesting to watch just because it's kind of like a study on how important Kismet is and how important, like, one time it's going to be magic and then the next time it's just going to be insanity. And this is just chaos. So if you're a Young Frankenstein fan, it's interesting to watch this just to see kind of like what, Kismet can devolve into. But I will go into... we talked about this when David Gregory was on, and he gave us copies of a couple of the Severin films, and I remarked that I had never seen Asylum before. So I watched 1972's Asylum finally, which was awesome. It was like most of the Amicus anthology films, like Torture Garden, I have found to be a little dry. Some of them are amazing, and then some of them I'm just kind of like, a little dry.
They've got a pretty good batting average, though, Amicus, for their horror anthologies.
I still need to see. I've also heard really good things about The House That Screamed.
The House That Dripped Blood.
That's the one.
Excellent. Written by Robert Bloch and just announced by Scream Factory. So they're doing a Blu-ray of that, which I was very excited about.
I've heard good things about that one, so I still need to check that out. But Asylum, 1972, the wraparound for this is really cool, where a guy shows up at Asylum. He says he's been given a job by this particular doctor who has hired him. And then he is told that this doctor went completely fucking insane, is somewhere in the asylum. And this guy who is now the head doctor says, I will hire you if you go interview all the patients upstairs and tell me which one you think is that doctor. And so then that's his job, is he has to go upstairs and interview like 4 or so patients to determine which one is the doctor who originally hired him.
I'll pay $2 for any audience member listening who does a supercut of me, Rob, and now Becca all explaining this plot over the course of maybe 2 years.
2 years,
and how different we probably will all approach that.
That's right.
So this was directed by Roy Ward Baker, who did Quatermass, and he also did one of my favorite Hammer films when they did their Hammer Shaw crossover, Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires.
That's a great one.
It's really fun.
Yeah, so and this is, all the stories in this were by Robert Bloch as well. Yeah. Some of them are, it's an anthology, so of course immediately your gut reaction is to go, some of them are better than others, but they were all pretty solid, actually. I definitely liked the first one, which was the body parts in the freezer one.
I love that.
That was definitely, and I liked the weird little robots as well.
Yeah, that's really weird.
But yeah, they were all pretty decent. So I liked the BFF Lucy one also because it had Willow from Wicker Man was in it. So yeah,
it's a really great anthology.
Really good stuff. So definitely check out Severin's snazzy new Blu-ray of Asylum. I think that just came out in December.
It did, and it's part of the box set, but it's also now separately. And I think take a look at the features, because I had seen a check disc back in October when I was doing my anthology thing, and I remember the features are pretty spectacular on there too, because I didn't know much about the whole Amicus history, and it's really fascinating. I mean, the main guy is kind of like just a typical. He's like a New Yorker and you think British, that, but no, one of the main partners who Ryan was talking about last week, where he was always like reading books every day and trying to find new material and stuff like that. So really fascinating documentary on there.
Nice.
My next pick is one that is actually the sponsor of this show. Shudder has just added Joe Lynch's new movie, Mayhem, which is I guess you could consider it kind of a horror action sort of thing. It has a horror element to it, and I fucking loved it. I just absolutely loved
Stephen King.
And apparently me and Stephen King are in good company. Stephen King tweeted about this movie, in particular, Steven Yeun's performance, who is really good in this. And that's probably the thing that I take away from this the most. I mean, I always liked him in The Walking Dead, but I haven't seen him in a lot of other things. Like, obviously, we all know him as Glenn. And so getting to see him front this movie, there is no doubt that he's got this great charisma, and he really fucking goes for it. Like, the kind of physical stuff that he has to do in this movie is spectacular. And it's a little weird because we see him for the most part in the same shape that he left The Walking Dead. So I kind of found that a little odd, like see him kind of bloody in a very similar fashion, but very, it's very basic, and it's very fast paced, and it's just, this, virus that, basically makes you lose all your inhibitions and kind of act out your darkest impulses, whether they're sexual or violent or whatever. And so when this happens, this version of society is able to quarantine it quickly and administer an antidote, but the antidote still takes about 24 hours or whatever it is. And so by irony, this is a law firm that has literally just got somebody off of a murder trial for this on grounds of temporary insanity because of blaming it on the virus. Mm-hmm. And so the irony is, like, these are the shittiest people on the planet, these lawyers, and they fire Steven Yeun's character, and basically they go immediately into quarantine. And so with 24 hours at his defense to do whatever he wants to these people, it's kind of a great, really dark, fucked up, satirical, hilarious, kind of action ride. But I really enjoyed it. I think, I've known Joe's from Long Island, New York, so am I, and I've known him for a really long time. I like his work a lot. I still think he made the best Wrong Turn movie.
Oh, I completely agree with that.
The second one's by far the best.
Yeah.
I like Everly, although I would have been more curious what that movie would have been like with his original choice, which was Kate Hudson was supposed to be that lead, because Salma Hayek, she doesn't fit in that movie to me, but otherwise I like that movie, and I'm like, I can't even think of who I would put in that role. But Salma Hayek doesn't feel right. But this, bar none, to me, is his best movie. And I agree with Mick Garris, who had said that a few weeks ago. So, and what's cool is, obviously, you guys can check this out on Shudder. But I haven't delved into this. Shudder, for this release, created a bunch of special features. So I believe Shudder has like an exclusive commentary with him and Steven, and some other like cool little odds and ends. And to me, that's what's been missing from a lot of the streaming services. And I'm sad that, Netflix doesn't really do it. They did do a Stranger Things after show, but I think that's the next step for these.
Filmstruck's already started, so they're doing a lot of extras, a lot of special original content too, like here's an original Scorsese thing. Where
and they have all the Criterion stuff.
They have all the Criterions, and they have a lot of other stuff that's rotating out. I don't use it as much as I'd want to because it's like all highbrow stuff for the most part. But like I'm noticing way more extra stuff coming.
Where do you get Filmstruck on? Do you have it on a Roku or whatever?
I have a film stick, Fire Stick.
Yeah, mine's through Roku.
For that one.
So that's the thing. I need it to be available through like an Amazon or one of my Sony devices, and then I will totally subscribe to it. Because I would love to have access to the Criterion Collection.
Yeah, there's some good stuff in there, for sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, Mayhem on Shudder right now.
And he has a podcast, right?
It's got a little thing called The Movie Crypt.
The Movie Crypt.
Yeah.
The movie.
Never heard of him.
Remember that? Back in our days.
Yeah.
You know
Podcast Wars. We haven't screwed
Podcast Wars.
We haven't screwed Podcast Wars.
We can't have Podcast Wars because we're on different networks now.
Networks.
It's not as fun. Anyway, here's a movie that I utterly loved that I saw. It's a Severin film. It's a movie Becca and Sam Zimmerman were both saying, this is going to be Elric's film a year ago at Texas Frightmare.
Did you finally watch Dark Waters?
I finally watched Dark Waters.
I fucking love that movie.
There's a director I was mistaking this guy for, and that was why I was taking a while to get to it. There was a guy, Dante
Tomaselli.
Who makes movies in that way that are kind of. So I'd watched one once, and I just was like, what? Like I had the artistry, but nothing to drive it. I thought that's who made this until I was watching it. And then I started, from minute one, I was like, oh my God, this is like the best parts of Dagon mixed with like a crazy nun movie. I mean, it's a really ambitious and really well put together and just totally bizarre story.
Mariano Banya he's
and that's the only feature he's made though. So I was really like perplexed because watching this, I would definitely think you would get another feature based on this. So anyway, this is actually one of the better Lovecraft feeling killing movies I've ever seen, which is saying a lot. And, you know, it's basically it's shot on like the Yugoslavian coast or something. But
actually, the story behind it is completely crazy because they shot parts of it. There was a war going on. I can't even remember.
It might have been even that.
Because I know that there was a couple of different locations, but that they had to shut down production for a while because there was a war. And then there were other times that there were actually like bombs going off while they were trying to shoot. So it was like crazy stories out of it.
No, but it's a great setting, and it opens great with there's this weird kind of like amulet kind of thing that has this like devilish weird Cthulhu kind of face, and there's all these nuns, and there's a nun who's trying to take this amulet to she's standing up on like this rocky shore, and something comes and kills her, and then it kind of opens up these floodgates of almost like the opening of City of the Living Dead with the priest who hangs himself, in this case the priest like drowning in a giant cross like impales in him, and you're just like, holy shit, this movie's going for it. Like it has walls opening with floods coming. I mean, this is the kind of stuff you can't really pull off on no budget, and it's kind of world building, which I really love when you're doing something Lovecraftian especially. And then it just opens 30 years later with this girl who's coming back to this town. She hasn't been there since she was a little girl. It's like a village, a small island that's really difficult to get to, and she gets out there and slowly starts to unravel this kind of the mystery of her background and her backstory, but it's really insidious and it's like really dark, and everything's paid off, and there's fascinating visuals. There's a part with like just hundreds of dead fish on a beach.
That's the image that stands out to me still.
Little things like that. There's a victim. It definitely has Argento-ish moments in terms of some of the murders, and also nuns, batshit crazy nuns, killing for what actually seems to be a good reason, and then it actually has payoff. And like I always say with these kind of movies, it's great to have slow burn or build up, but if you don't also have payoff, no one's going to remember your movie. This actually has creature payoff at the end where you're like, damn, what? Yep. So I really, this might be one of those great discoveries of the year. I'll probably make my discoveries of the year list because it was just so much fun and artistry behind it.
Dark Waters, and that's Severin Films has got a great disc of that out.
And I take 1 year to listen to you.
Thanks. I'm glad you finally watched it. No, I've always said that it felt like this film was made for me because it's Lovecraft, sea creatures, and nuns.
Totally. It's
all in one swoop. But I just looked it up. It was shot in Ukraine following the collapse of the Soviet Union. And so there was all types of problems. There was a moment where they were in Moscow doing some of the filming, and they woke up to tanks driving down the street and gunfire. So yeah, it was.
Do we know why Mario hasn't made another feature? He seems to have made a couple shorts, but nothing.
I'm not sure. He's got a very interesting artistic relationship with Coralina from the Demons 2. So they've collaborated on like stage show things in New York City, and
he lives in New York, right?
Yeah,
and she does a lot of music as well, and so they've collaborated over the years, but just haven't done a feature. I think he's done shorts with her and stuff.
Yeah, well, it'd be cool to get him on the show one day, like if he's ever out here.
Yeah. I can. I'm in touch with him every once in a while.
Okay,
I can see. I can see about that.
Tell him I liked it.
I will. There you go. Becca?
So, Marnie is now getting to the point where she like wants to sit down and watch non-cartoon movies, which is really nice because I've seen Moana like 50 bajillion times.
You still have to bring her over for 3D movies, by the way.
I do. She's gonna love it. But she's starting like we've worked through all of the Harry Potter movies, which I forgot how scary those actually are until like Voldemort appears as a giant snake and is like hissing at the screen, and then I'm like, okay, she's cool. So on Super Bowl night, we were watching the game, which we just pretty much watched for the commercials. And midway through, she was like, I'm sick of this. And we were like, yeah, okay, us too. So we asked her what she wanted to watch, and they ran a trailer during the Super Bowl for the new Jurassic Park film. And then she was like, I want to watch that. And so we were like, well, we'll watch the original. So we rewatched the original Jurassic Park, which some people consider horror and some people don't. But it's got giant dinosaurs eating folks, so I'm going to put it in the horror realm for today. So it was just really cool to go back and rewatch that. I will say that it does not look as glorious as it did when I saw it in the theater. Now watching it at home in HD,
it still looks better than any of the sequels to Jurassic Park.
Yes, that is true. There's some makeup. Some of the dinosaurs look flatter than the world around them now, but it still looks...
I'll show it to you in 3D.
Okay. I have not seen it in 3D.
The 3D one, and you know what's funny is because even though they didn't shoot that film for 3D at all, it's one of the few conversions that it's almost like he intended it that way all along.
Wow.
Like, it looks great.
And that
Much
totally
better.
makes sense with a lot of the shots because it is very kind of POV-ish with things kind of coming at the screen. So I can see why that totally works. I forgot how scary that was as well. Marnie's like tough, so she was totally fine with it. But there were definitely moments where I was like, I forgot that, how good the scares are built. And that was the whole point of me talking about it today.
How did she react to the water, like something simple like that that's more suspense-based, like with the water kind of ricocheting?
So that's what I was going to talk about, is that his scares in the movie, they always have a lead-in. It's never just like the velociraptor jumps out. There's always this suspense moment on something small. So it might just be like leaves rustling or things like that, but there's always like a precursor, and it makes it 10 times more terrifying. Yeah. In that scene, Marnie was just excited because she knew that it meant the T-Rex was coming, and she was so excited because she was like, the T-Rex is coming. Yeah. The velociraptors definitely like scared her the most, but it was really cool to see how the scares are constructed in that, because it's not just a jump out at you. You know it's coming, and there's always like an indicator, and then it takes a while to get there, but it actually really ups the ante a lot. Yeah. So,
it's a great movie. I haven't seen it in a long time, though.
Come over and let's do a 3D Jurassic
I'd like to see that.
Bring
in 3D.
The kids. I don't know if your kids are up for it yet, Elric. But
the youngest one would be. He'd be all about dinosaurs. Do you know who one of the stars of that movie is?
Yeah, I do.
Sam Neill from Possession.
I've heard that.
It's been a while since we've had a Possession throwdown.
I've heard of that guy.
I've heard.
I miss seeing him as a lead. You know what I mean? There was a period where he was lead. That's so cool.
And he's totally the leading man.
He's a great lead in it.
And there are scenes built around him just doing stupid shit. Like there's an entire scene where he can't get the belt to work in the helicopter, and it's like 5 minutes of him like jerry rigging a belt before he just ties it like cool. A seatbelt.
I miss him. He should be an action star still.
Yeah. He definitely carries the movie a lot. I mean, and Jeff Goldblum is just
and he was in a Super Bowl ad for it. He was in the Super Bowl.
Oh, wow. Let's see. So that was Jurassic Park. I've been meaning to talk about this for weeks, so apologies to the filmmaker, because he's a big Shockwaves listener. His name is John Schnitzer, and it is a new documentary that is on Netflix right now called Haunters, The Art of the Scare.
I've been looking forward to seeing it.
It's pretty good. It's basically, obviously we've talked a bit. You should go back to our episode with Andrew Cash and Buzz Wallach about the tension experience. Because, one of the big things, not just here in Los Angeles, but across the country, is haunts. What was the one that the guy from Troll 2 made? Because that one was The American Scare. Is that what was out?
Oh yeah.
So that one, there was a documentary about kind of people building their own home haunts. And I love that one. This one takes it a little step further. American Scream, yeah. So this one takes it a little bit further. Haunters is kind of expanding upon that idea of how there's lots of people across the country to do it. Why do they do it? You see people like Jason Blum pops up in it. The Soska sisters, from the whole elevator thing. And so he kind of talks to a few names and faces here, but then kind of focuses on a handful of people. Some of them are performers, people that like just get a thrill out of being a performer the whole time. But then I think a big portion of the film, and this is why it's a lot of people are mixed on it, is because this guy is insane. A big portion of it focuses on McCamey Manor in San Diego.
So he's made a film with that guy in it?
Yes.
Because me and Josh Forbes had been talking about going down and filming that guy.
You don't want to do that.
This is the one where like only 5 people can come in at a time, and it's like super intense.
And it's dog food. You pay in dog food.
Yeah, you pay in dog food. That's correct.
Dog food donations.
His story, I will say this, it's kind of amazing and fascinating because when you meet the guy, he's a total normal guy. Yeah. I don't know if I want to give it away, but I will. Like he's a wedding singer. He does this whole thing, charity for dogs. They're like, okay, but then the persona he takes on for what his haunt is the most extreme. It definitely borders on torture. Yeah. And people vomit and they get tortured to the point of vomiting, and then you have to eat it again. And
oh dear Lord, I'm done.
It's really horrific. Yeah. The levels that this guy pushes people to. And
hell no.
No. And he videotapes
maybe,
it all.
But that, no.
And so he videotapes it all, and it's on his website and stuff. Yeah. And of course, his neighbors hate him. They want to shut the whole thing down. And so I think, and even he laughs and says things like, I wouldn't do my own haunt. Like, what? No, I'm normal. Why would I do it? And so
Does it get into the psychology of the people who do it at all?
Some of it, yeah, a little
That's
bit.
fascinating.
And I am a little creeped out by them because some of them, survive what's this crazy, and it's really uncomfortable to watch them.
They shave their heads and stuff, right?
They
I've
do
seen
really
girls have
weird
to
shit
shave
to
their
them,
heads.
and then they're like, "Oh, I volunteered for next year because I want to know what it feels like to torture people like that." And I'm like, I'm kind of scared of those
It's gone
people.
hostile
Yeah.
direction.
It's really weird, and so I think if because the response has been kind of mixed to it. I think it's a really good documentary, but if people are negative towards it, I think it's because a good chunk of it is about that particular guy and that haunt and those people. But
Is
overall,
tension mentioned? The tension stuff?
no, but Blackout
I think
is
that
the creator of Blackout's in it.
Yeah, this one was made before Tension became it was
thing.
still in like its beta when they were
Got
doing
it.
this.
And I'm pretty sure there's a Blackout documentary as well.
I've seen that one, yeah.
That one I haven't seen yet, but the guy is in there, and even he's like, "Oh, I think McCanny's crazy."
That one's pretty depressing because you're really looking at people who become obsessed by these things and how it kind of takes over their lives, and they're kind of it was pretty sad actually.
Yeah.
It's a hard one to watch, the Blackout one.
Yeah,
I thought,
yeah. Well, this one stays kind of fun.
Good.
Yeah.
That's good. I can't do those haunts. Like we talked about this, I think back on our Halloween show, but the ones that are more like, I want to try the Tension experience just because it sounds kind
that
of
was more
mind bending.
sensual and mind bending.
Yeah. But the ones that are like, because I did one, which was downtown Los Angeles, and I don't think it was Blackout a couple of years ago. There was like a year where they had like 6 of them, but it was literally like people screaming at you. People were putting guns in your faces. They made you wear second sets of clothing because they were going to make you take the first set off, which was weird. So you had to wear clothes over clothes so that you could disrobe. And I did that one, and I was just so done with it within the first 5 minutes.
Yeah,
and
I'm
it went
not.
on for like a half an hour, and then I was just like, I'm not even buying this anymore. And it made me miss like the haunts that I used to go to in Ocean City, where you'd like walk through and a giant plastic skeleton would jump out and everybody would scream and then laugh, and it was fun.
Yeah.
There's a fine line there.
I got it. I'm just a maze guy. I like mazes with cool creation and production design and people popping out occasionally, and you have fun, and it's got Halloweeny vibe to it, and that's it. I can't do any of these extreme ones, but if you want to vicariously do it, then by all means, check out Haunters, The Art of the Scare on Netflix.
And there's the other one that I think is also on Shudder now called Spookers. And that one I talked about a few months ago, and that is kind of a similar thing, but a giant insane asylum in New Zealand that every year they put on the one of the biggest horror haunts of all. And that's I've heard that it's similar to the Haunters, but it's just that one place.
It's called Spookers?
Spookers, yeah. And it's interesting. It's very quirky and kind of funny in terms of how it portrays the whole world, but I'm pretty sure it popped up on Shudder just recently. I saw it for the Knoxville Film Festival last year, and it's an interesting film. It's the kind of movie where it's like should be 30 minutes and it'd be really interesting, and then at like 80 minutes you're like, really? Like, okay. Actually, I saw something I realized I'd never seen. I utterly love Gate. The Gate.
The Gate.
And
The original Gate.
And I saw the Gate 2.
Gate 2, okay.
How is it?
Which I'd never seen, so I wasn't sure if I had ever seen it before. And I've been just randomly seeing quite a lot of just last few weeks of Tibor Takis, the director, because he might come and teach a class where I work and stuff. And he's a super cool guy. And I had asked him, "Hey, could I see a copy?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't have one here." And then he was going away to Canada. Then so a friend of mine got a disc and lent it to me, so I watched it last night.
Well, this is fun. You do know Scream Factory's putting it out at the end of the month.
No, this is the Blu-ray. I saw
this is the Blu-ray.
version,
So this comes out February 27th officially.
Yeah. So I saw the early version, and the extra is a really great interview actually with the three of them,
which is done by Jackson Stewart. He's
that makes
credited.
sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense because I saw a photo of him with Tibor. And that. But I have to start with this line. This is a line from the movie. "Who needs demons when you've got chicks?" Love that line. Just ridiculous.
Can we get that as a cavity post t-shirt or what?
Totally. I wish I could be as excited about the movie as a whole, because it is all the things I love about the first, and it's great that Tibor still got to direct it, but and it's the same writer. Everything I love about the first one, they actually don't even really do in the second. It's like a very different kind of setting, which I respect that they were trying to make a different movie. I know in the extra features, Tibor really says, "I don't really want to make a sequel because we kind of hit lightning in a bottle. We got it right."
Yeah.
And so they wanted to find a different angle. It's his friend, the tall kind of geeky guy with the glasses and the floppy red hair, who basically is the lead, and because they couldn't get Dorf. And years later, he wants to go back to the house and just by himself himself. He starts his little ceremony to kind of, because he's like, oh, we did it wrong. Like that's the problem. Let's go back and try to do it right. But this is when it's like that movie I want to watch. But then when you're doing that, and then the three bad punk characters from directly, just how I felt about the bad the characters I didn't like in the new Stranger Things episode. Remember? It was the same problem. They show up and start wanting to get in his grill, and then the ceremony goes AWOL. And then the whole movie like is never really in the house location again. They're constantly like making wishes, and I mean
they only have one demon too, right?
Yeah, one at the start. Yeah, one at the start, and it's the demon stuff. That stuff's gold. Like it's really good. This one builds to a really, really big place, like really surprising with like really giant creature effects and things like that. It just never really works as a movie. It's got a couple fun moments for sure, and I wouldn't hate on a movie like this at all. It's more like, oh no, it's still got some charm, but like The Gate's a fucking master. Like I've really come around to thinking it's one of the great 80s horror movies, not just a good one.
Yeah.
This is not even in the kind of ballpark, but it'd still be fun for people. I'm sure that'd be fun to watch back to back, just to kind of see, because you at least have
I've
some
never done that
continuity.
before.
Yeah,
I think that'd be fun.
And I still think that world would be fun to revisit in some way if they could get another one. But there's just something that's kind of disconnected about this one. But yeah, the interview is really interesting. They talk about their whole process. The special effects guy, the original writer, and Tibor
all together.
So it
by
is
the
the same special effects guy.
Oh yeah, Randall Cook.
Yeah, he comes back
did
too.
it.
Yeah, they all got back together. Yeah, interesting flick, and I definitely had not seen it. So,
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah,
The Gate too.
That's great.
Return to the Nightmare.
Yeah, and I promise that we'll have Tibor on, because I've already asked him, and he
Great.
he
No, I
seemed
love
very
him.
interested.
I worked with him on the I'm Mad Mad disc,
which is a
and he's
great
a great
film.
guy.
Love that film,
Yeah. Becca, any last minute additions?
Nope, that's it for me.
All right, well, I'm going to close out with two quickies. One is not really horror, but it was George Romero's birthday in the past week, and a lot of people posted stuff, and I was like, you know what? I want to watch a Romero movie that I've never seen before, and so I broke out the Arrow box set, and I checked out There's Always Vanilla.
Yeah, still haven't seen
yeah.
Which is not a horror movie by any means. It's his actual follow-up to Night of the Living Dead. It's the movie he made right after. And it's kind of interesting to see a lot of the same familiar faces, but in a normal, like the zombie from the beginning of Night of the Living Dead is in the bar as, like, just like as a drunken guy. And Russ Streiner is directing like videos and stuff like that, like commercials. It's an interesting film. It's definitely of its time. And I know that for many years, Romero didn't think very kindly of it. And on the special features, in fact, he even said he didn't think kindly of it. But I heard that before he passed, he actually really came around on it. Like he looked at it again and was like, you know what? This was actually not bad for who I was at that point in my life. And so, it's not a great movie. It's a pretty traditional drama about a guy that meets a girl that's supposedly a little older than him, although I didn't think they looked like any difference in age. And he may or may not already have a son or a daughter with this other woman. It's just basically a kind of almost like a domestic sort of drama.
No porn at all?
No, not really.
See, that something about that title, I always thought it was like his softcore film.
Yes, so did I. I always
totally
thought that it
sounds
was
softcore to me.
like, yeah.
Well, I mean, the two
It's always
characters
been
have a couple love scenes, and they're both naked in them, but not any more
What's
graphic.
the title refer to?
It's kind of a speech that his father, the main character's father, gives him about how, there's always things going on in your life, but the basic things are always vanilla.
I think that it's the cover. I remember the cover of this being really sexy. It's like a blonde girl turned to the side.
Yeah, and I mean, that's part of it, but it's not really like that. Okay. But anyway, in terms of Romero's filmography, I think it's great that Arrow restored these films. I haven't seen Season of the Witch yet, and that's next on my list.
Yeah. I love it.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely recommend it. There's Always Vanilla, and then I also checked out. We've been all about Severin the last couple of weeks because they've been hitting us with so much stuff. I checked out their Jack the Ripper release, which was the rare 1958 version of Jack the Ripper. And the one it's got 3 cuts on the disc, because of course it does. I watched the UK cut, which was pretty good. It's a black and white, kind of retelling their version of the Jack and Ripper story, but it's also kind of slightly a whodunit. And then the American one has gore inserts put in there, so that's kind of interesting. And then a third hybrid cut, which is a French version of it with subtitles and stuff.
You need all 3, Severin, really?
But bless them, because they always do that.
Yeah,
and the quality isn't that great because I don't think they had the greatest elements. This wasn't an official release. This was a Black Friday only release. And David had told us that they will sell it at their table if you see them at a convention, but it's not really something you can get off their website. It was just a Black Friday thing, and I think that's part of the deal. But I dug it. I thought it was a pretty wacky version of the Jack the Ripper tale. And I'm always fascinated by movies from like the late 50s, early 60s, that time period, trying to do horror and seeing what they get away with. I always use Psycho from 1960 as the barometer, like, because I know that so well and what that changed.
Anything after that could
everything after
further,
right before, it's always like, you know, because I'm always fascinated by Eyes Without a Face, which was like the year after Psycho, and I'm like, I can't believe
that
also, I guess it's
what they get away
in
with
France,
yeah. So Jack the Ripper, that's a great movie as well. And lastly, before we bring our guests on, I didn't know if I was going to say anything about this or not, but it irked me today, and so I am going to bring it up on the show, which was basically, you know, I chime in occasionally on our group to see what people are talking about, and friend of the show's and a friend of mine, Brian Fuller, has left Amazing Stories. That was the next show he was going to do, and he's officially backed out of it. And I guess the way people were talking about it in the group was a little on the snarky side, because obviously this isn't the first time this has happened. Yeah. And so I just want to give you context, okay? Because, you know, this is the third show in a row now that he's had to leave. And just from my personal experience with him and talking to him, think of your job, okay? Whatever job it is you have out there, think of the people you work with. Think of the people that don't do their job well, and think of how much responsibility you have to take for the people that can't do their job around you. Because I'm in a position now where I like my job, but it is very difficult. It is very stressful, and you have no idea the stress and strain on your actual physical body that your job can do on you. And so before you get snarky about him stepping away from our show, just think about this. What if you were in a position where if you were surrounded by people that you thought were going to make your life a living hell for the next year, and you were like, fuck it, I'm not doing it. I respect that, quite frankly. Yeah, it'd be great to work on Amazing Stories and some of these other well-known properties, but he's in a position now where it's like, fuck it. If I don't think it's going to be worth it, then why would I do it? And so I guess my point is, like, instead of being snarky about that whole thing, just keep that in mind, that if you were unhappy at your job and you had the power to just leave it and be like, well, fuck it, let them deal with whatever they want to deal with, and I'm going to try to do something that's more you would do the same thing,
right? And it's even more than just your job. It's because you're Brian Fuller. If it goes poorly, it's Brian Fuller did poorly. Brian Fuller's show is not good. And so if you see people on your team that you don't think are going to be up to the level of what Hannibal was, then don't do it. And, you know, and we've also heard he's a perfectionist, and we heard that on Hannibal, and it shows. You could look at any frame of Hannibal and go, this is not made by a normal human. This is made by someone with a different kind of attention to detail.
Even
and that's
the same
what
thing
we
with American
love.
Gods had that feel.
That's why it's cinematic. So, yeah, it's a bummer. It's a bummer that he is off that, because that does sound like a property I'd love to see him on. But fuck it, he's the talent.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Like,
and I guess my point is, I love you, Brian, and I support whatever you do, regardless of what anyone else has to say about it. So,
all right,
there you have it. Okay, so quick break. Let's hear from our sponsors.
I feel like we should have something called Rob's Corner at the end of each one, where you get to like do one rant. Like
one rant.
Like
the Wiz has been holding it in all week.
I'm in my 40s now. I got plenty of rants to come out. Let me tell you. All right, so let's bring our guests on.
Tonight's episode of Shockwaves is brought to you by Severin Films, offering high-quality DVDs and Blu-rays for the horror, exploitation, and sleaze connoisseur. Coming on February 20th from Severin, the infamous cannibal movie Eaten Alive, now fully restored in HD for the first time ever. 8 years after the first unleashed the Italian cannibal craze, spaghetti splatter master Umberto Lenzi, Nightmare City, and Cannibal Frogs, return to the jungle for this graphic gut muncher that still packs the power to rip your dick off. Eurosleeves Hall of Famers Robert Kerman from Cannibal Holocaust, Jenna Agron from City of the Living Dead, and many more iconic faces star in this insane assemblage of flesh-ripping mayhem. Eaten Alive is now presented uncut, uncensored, and fully remastered in HD for the first time ever, with all new special features that slit open the legacy of this definitive cannibal classic. Also available is our Eaten Alive dedicated set, The Canna Bundle, featuring our special Eaten Alive Blu-ray release with a limited edition slipcover, only 2,500 available, CD soundtrack, an Eaten Alive t-shirt, and a special Umberto Lenzi enamel pin. Visit www.severin-films.com today, or check them out on social media. And don't forget to also check out their amazing titles like the new Amicus release and our favorite, The Devil's Honey. www.severin-films.com.
Today's episode of Shockwaves is also sponsored by Shudder, brought to you by AMC Networks. Shudder is not only a premium streaming video service, but an experience unlike any other. Created for fans of all degrees of thriller, suspense, and horror, Shudder is home to the largest and fastest-growing human-curated selection of high-quality, spine-tingling, and provocative films, TV series, and originals. And there's always something new and unexpected for Shudder members to explore. Premiering on Shudder this week is Mayhem, Joe Lynch's thrilling action-horror comedy hybrid. When a law office is hit by a virus that causes its victims to act out their most violent urges, a recently fired employee uses the building's quarantine as an opportunity to strike back at his company's heartless executives in the sharp, violent satire of the corporate world. Starring The Walking Dead's Steven Yeun and Ash vs. Evil Dead's Samara Weaving, Mayhem is declared fantastically creative, subversive, and Tarantino-esque by the Chicago Sun-Times. Mayhem is now streaming only on Shudder. Shudder is available for $4.99 a month or $49.99 with an annual membership, but our listeners can get a free month by entering the promo code SHOCK at checkout. Go to Shudder.com today and find the best collection of thrillers, suspense, and horror available to stream anywhere.
Have you bought your tickets to Texas Frightmare yet? The Shockwaves gang is going to be there and you don't want to miss it. Just announced this week, Charlie Band is going to be a guest. Other guests include Clive Barker and several of the original Cenobites, including Doug Bradley, Katie Featherston, Steven Weber, Shawnee Smith, Tobin Bell, Matthew Lillard, Darren Lynn Bousman, Ron Perlman, and many more. Plus, there will be screenings, parties, and a live Shockwaves. Don't miss this horror convention. Go to www.texasfrightmareweekend.com and get your tickets now. Come out and celebrate Women in Horror Month at Phoenix's Film Bar. This February, Film Bar is showcasing and honoring the works of women in horror with screenings such as Girl Walks Home Alone, The Love Witch, and Pet Sematary. In addition to coming together to commend the female voice in horror, we will be supporting some special nonprofits as well. Planned Parenthood, Fresh Start Women's Foundation, and the Stephanie Rothman Fellowship for Women in Film, sponsored by Shockwaves, continue to make a difference in the lives of women. $3 from every ticket sold will be donated to one of these organizations. Unite with us and make a stand for female empowerment through film. Check out Film Bar in Phoenix for more information.
All right, welcome back to the show. We're very excited. This movie is out now. Tragedy Girls is out on VOD. It's on iTunes. It's on Blu-ray. A lot of the people in our group have already seen it and loved it. A lot of you guys have picked it for your top 10 of last year, even though Becca's debating if it counts this year as well.
Well, apparently it's against the rules. It did a limited theatrical last year.
You guys don't listen to the rules anymore, so it doesn't matter.
It's doing its big VOD release coming up soon, so it may make my 2000.
Now it's already out.
Oh, it's already out.
This is
out.
it. Yes.
But it may make my 2018 list.
I'm breaking the rules. Anyway,
I'm thinking about it.
We are very thrilled to have the director, Tyler McIntyre. Welcome.
Hello.
As well as the writer, Chris Lee Hill.
How's it going?
Hey, hello. How are you guys?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the movie, first of
Yeah.
all. It's been getting a pretty tremendous response because it's one of those films that hits that sweet spot of kind of, I don't know if I'd call it a horror comedy per se, but it definitely has both. It's that perfect marriage of the two things. And what were some of the examples we were talking about before of things in this vein? Like
I said detention.
Detention.
Detention,
it feels a lot like
Final
Detention.
Girls, which is a very different kind of. See, where my problem, the difference between Final Girls, which I love the premise. I think the premise is one of the best in years. I love the heart of that film, but I don't like the execution of the horror. In this film, I actually think the comedy and heart are nailed, but the horror beats are also nailed, and I think that's one of the big differences between those for me. Because I still really like that film.
And I felt
that's
like
another comparable.
Yeah, it worked together. Like there's an opening scene with the two girls and a serial killer, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
Like I was just guffawing.
It's
through
black.
The whole
I mean,
thing.
this is also a very dark black comedy.
Oh yeah.
You know, in the same way Heathers, which we've been talking about, and Scream. The reviewers that put Heathers and Scream together obviously are definitely getting a lot of that right.
That seems
in terms
accurate.
of tonally, you know.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our big touchstones were like we essentially when we asked to take a stab at rewriting this because it was an existing script that was nothing at all.
Okay.
Yeah, it was nothing at all like this though.
How did it come to you?
Well, it was there's a script called Tragedy Girls that was optioned by this company called the Comeback Kids, and a friend of ours, Tom Morris, was working there, and he had seen an early cut of our first movie, Patchwork, which was a horror comedy with like kind of female centric, and so he was. They had this kind of like slasher movie in high school, and they didn't like people weren't really responding to the script, and so they were like, well, we need a way to kind of freshen this up and sort of conceive it. And so Chris and I kind of got together and started brainstorming various ideas of like, well, why aren't they really doing slasher movies? Because this was back in like 2015, where there was kind of like this lull where it was really like Hatchet and maybe nothing else. And so we were talking about, well, like, what's the problem with slasher movies? Like, why don't they really work anymore? And I was like, well, they're kind of didactic. Like, they're kind of moralizing. Like, and it's very much like, you know, don't do sex, don't do drugs. Like, you know, really like baby boomer sort of shit. Like that is very irrelevant these days. And so like that battle's fought and lost already.
Yeah.
That's been a theory that I've read before, that slasher films are innately right wing. And so if you tend to go with a more liberal approach to horror films, slashers will no longer work because you're no longer punishing sin.
Exactly. And so like, you know, and along with those tropes, which are pretty classic, obviously, like, you know, like young women tend to get objectified and then fucking killed. And then so we wanted to, you know, kind of flip that narrative a little bit. And that really gave us that opening scene where we kind of have these two girls who would normally be, you know, the victims in a horror movie. And then we get into the perspective and they're actually very active characters. And we're kind of behind the scenes of something like a slasher that we grew up with, which would be like, you know, like the Kevin Williamson generation of like, you know, I Know What You Did Last Summer or something like that, where a town is being terrorized by some people. And now we're kind of with them in that.
And they're benefiting from it, which is the fun part.
Exactly. And so it kind of put us in this weird position where we had to create drama in a different way. Because like you can't, like if you're with a character trying to kill somebody, it's not the same as like, oh, I'm with the character in the point of view of someone who's being scared. So you have to kind of go with like the challenge of the chase and then also find ways to kind of flip and invert and, you know, tap dance around that stuff a little bit.
And it took a couple drafts to get that nailed down too, because there would be set pieces that we wrote initially that were a lot more traditional and kind of spooky in a slasher sense, but it really started to work once we made, okay, the girls are the underdogs in every scenario. So that's why they're constantly like making mistakes and having, you know, negative coincidences, and they're constantly like pushing a boulder uphill to try and get recognized as like, oh, you guys are famous and covering true crime. Yeah,
and like primarily it's a satire. You know, like the movie's morally not with people murdering people, right? Like obviously, you know, and so but the way in is that we were always behind was the idea that everybody can identify with having a best friend or working on something with your friends, and so even though that's like a very nefarious thing in this context, you know, that's what we were, you know, trying to flip the narrative to, you know, make the engine of the film. And then we ended up kind of filling out a lot of the rest of the DNA with stuff like, you know, high school movies and tropes that we wanted to play with, because we've always wanted to make a high school movie because they always had a prom. Right. And they're always like, you know, it's very indicative of that, of like a very American sort of approach. And we thought that was hilarious. And so like a lot of our main references were stuff like Jawbreaker.
Yeah. Such a good movie. I love Jawbreaker. It's
amazing, yeah.
It's like completely, I never hear anybody talk about it anymore, but when I was in college, like Jawbreaker was the shit.
Yeah, and like we actually like went after specifically those casting directors for this movie.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and they had like Lisa Beach and Sarah Katzman, and they did a great job. They cast Scream and Wedding Crashers and a bunch of other classics. And
that's great.
So if we had read the original script, how different would it seem if we were watching that movie now? What would be tonally, what did you change tonally the most?
Well, I mean, it's what they call a page one rewrite. So it was like really, we reconceived the whole situation. Like the original was, had the title and it had the scenario of two girls in high school. And it was kind of like a copycat killer situation where they would make a YouTube video of a horror review of something, and then a killer would mimic that type of scenario, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, someone's copying us. And, you know, so it was just a different type of story they were trying to tell, I think.
Yeah, like they were trying to figure out who was doing the killing.
Huh. And what can you talk a little bit about your working relationship together, like how you guys kind of ended up becoming co-writers and you know, previous projects? Like, how did you guys get in sync?
Yeah. How did we get in sync, Chris?
Sure. I feel like we aren't quite in sync right now, but we met back in Canada, where we're both from, and we grew up in small towns, but we both like were the kids with movie cameras, and we made shorts in our high schools. And so when we met in university, we were both in the film club, and since Tyler owned an XL1, you know, we would take that out on weekends and do all kinds of weird stuff with it. But so we made a lot of short films, and that was just a great training ground because you can try all kinds of things and make a bunch of mistakes, and there's no stakes to making movies that nobody cares about. But yeah, I think we tried out a lot of different styles.
Yeah, definitely. And like, so we made like, you know, dozens of short films like in university, and then eventually we both moved to Toronto. And then Chris started working in TV there, and I went to grad school and really hated it. So I ended up going to AFI in Los Angeles, and then so I moved here and went to school and finished up and started working for Roger Corman and did that for about a year.
What kind of stuff there were you doing?
I was doing mostly a re-edit of this movie called The Racer, starring Christopher Lloyd. Yeah. If you can find a copy of it, don't watch it. But yeah, so it was kind of a weird thing where it was like an existing movie that was like, you know, just super micro budget that was shot in Louisiana with like Christopher Lloyd for 2 days kind of thing. And it ended up, just being in real big trouble. And so I did like a re-edit of it, ended up at like 60 minutes. And then he was like, ooh, it's too short. Go home and write some additional pages and maybe we'll shoot them. And I was like, cool. So I did this, my first job was really directing the second unit pickup stuff for that. And went down to USC and shot 15 pages there.
What did you learn? Because I feel like everyone learns something, even no matter how brief their time at Corman School. What's your takeaway from that experience?
I mean, I really just kind of was like, oh, well, this is how it gets done. You know, like it was like legitimately my first job in Hollywood. And, I remember being so impressed when I like walked into his office and he had this big brass R and this big brass C as like his, doorknobs. And it just, it was cool because I'm kind of one of the last people to kind of get through that school because he was, in his 80s at the time, and
he's 90 now, right?
Yeah. And, but he's hanging in there and, he was always very nice to me and gave us a reference for my visa and everything and helped out.
Wow.
That's cool. You've been touched.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So were there for both of you guys, did you bond over the horror genre specifically, or was it just movies in general? Like, what was kind of the things that the films and things that you were like, oh, we totally should be friends now?
Well, I mean, for the record, Tyler's more the messed up one, and I bring more the comedy to the situation. But like, it was about 5 years ago. Like, I came down here for my first time, and we were hanging out. And we pitched each other a bunch of like a backlog of ideas, which we both have like on our hard drive, and so we take turns pitching out. Like, probably 90% of those are not good. But like we're looking for something to spark, and eventually we hit upon like a wedding comedy idea. So we wrote that script, and that was like the first feature we wrote together. And and
then we really figured out that like what we really like to do is kind of take like sort of high concept genre stuff and then like subvert it as much as we can, and then do like a version of that, but it's just a little twisted. And like most of our movies are about taking some sort of fundamental expectation that people have about a certain type of movie, and then taking them somewhere they haven't been before.
Yeah. And what about the writing process? I mean, do you go back and forth with, do you write in the same room together, or does it, go back and forth a little bit?
Preferably not. Like there's the pitching stage, as I said, and then once we settle on an idea, we'll talk out like a lot of the big moves. So like our major polls, like how's it going to end? What's the midpoint? Like real Hollywood type of stuff. But, Then we'll probably talk about like more character details, and we usually write the first 10 pages or so together just to get the tone of it right. But we've worked separately a lot. Like Tragedy Girls, I was actually living in Canada, and we would email pages back and forth, like so we can do it long distance as well.
Yeah, and it works fine. And now that we're half a dozen scripts deep, like our voices have really melded into very similar things where we kind of can almost like divide it up into like, I'm writing these 10 pages, he's writing these next 10 pages. And I really like that because it's sort of like you'll like, push to be like, oh, I just, and then they walk through the door and I can read the next 10 pages. Like I don't have to think anymore. And you're kind of like, and by the time you're done that, you're like,
of a thought you never had.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's actually quite, it works pretty well.
Yeah.
But I've tried co-working with other people. It hasn't been as smooth. So I don't know what the hell's going on with us, but
yeah, I think it's eating lots of bananas that helps. But like on our first feature, Patchwork, which is divided up into chapters, like that made it very easy to establish our structure. Was that like every 12 pages or so was the end of a chapter, and then so we've continued that trend into all the movies that we write together.
Can you tell us a little bit about the casting? Because what impresses me, usually what makes a movie like this work or not work, and it was definitely the case I thought with Happy Death Day, where it could have just totally fallen over. Where it works is the chemistry. Like the chemistry between the two characters and the main character to the audience was just spot on with Happy Death Day. And I think it's very similar with your film. Like the two girls, especially the chemistry they share. And also you're talking about like making a best friend movie where friends help each other. And all best friend narratives in real life, I always feel like at some point of that best friendship, something comes in between you and separate, and you often can't remember what it was that came between you, because you know what I mean. It's always just, and I think it's a very real narrative, you know. So just talk a little bit about how you assembled the group.
Yeah, I mean, we were. I'm very mindful of chemistry in general, but it's once you get to a kind of a certain budget level, like most of the actors you're offering are like offer only, and may or may not want to meet with you or have time to meet with you. So sometimes you can't really like be too choosy about it. You just kind of have to like make lists and become familiar with their work and try and figure it out. But this time around, we spent a lot of time talking with our cast directors about like who are the young actresses out there who could, you know, play high school and still, you know, would be interested in this sort of material. And Brianna and Alex were pretty near the top of our lists. And then someone kind of threw out there like, oh, they probably know each other. And I was like, oh, why is that? And it's like, well, we realized because Brianna's in Deadpool.
Oh, right.
And Alex is in X-Men Apocalypse.
Yeah, she's the new Storm, right?
Exactly, yeah.
That's so funny, the X-Men connection.
And so they've been to like Comic-Con together, and they'd like hung out and stuff. And so I ended up meeting with Alex first at like just the one-on-one cafe and sat down. She's like, I just came from Brianna's house and we did a table read and it was amazing. And like, and so we got a little bit of like, you know, they were, they kind of they got the tone of it and got really into it. And I was like, oh, cool. Like I can build on the existing chemistry here. And they like lived together while we were shooting. And,
oh, wow.
You know, and I kind of realized, I'm like, oh, as long as they're on the same page, then this is going to work. You know, even if they're arguing with me, like that's good. As long as they're together, you know, and it worked out pretty well. And
do you guys rewrite it all once you cast, like for them, their personalities?
Specifically, or the biggest instance of that in this movie was Josh Hutcherson's scenes, like because that character Toby was what he was before, and they just both kind of mutually disliked him. But you know, once we heard that like Josh was a possibility, it became like, oh, we could probably do something really cool with this, and that sort of evolved into the version that he is in the film, where he's like, man, just a charming douchebag, just like the
Yeah, I know. I mean, I think the chemistry in this film is definitely one of the driving forces. The guy plays the villain who was from the
Kevin Durand.
Kevin Durand, yeah. Like, so when you write that role, it feels like that could really not work if you didn't get an actor as charismatic, as interesting as that.
Yeah, it could have become a caricature.
No,
he's got an X-Men connection too, apparently.
No, he's the Blob in the Wolverine movie they don't talk about.
Yeah, that's so funny.
What's that movie, The Dark of Night or something that he's in?
I'm not sure.
Is it the one in the woods?
Yeah, but the church and all the kind
Dark Was the Night?
Yeah.
Dark Was the Night. He's really good in that, too.
Yeah, and he's in The Strain, obviously.
Yeah, he's got a big role in
Strain. Like in the Vikings.
And just chatting with him on set, like he went to Canada's National Theatre School, which is like the most prestigious.
It's like Juilliard.
Yeah, and it's like, and he's like, yeah, I'm trained in Shakespeare, and I'm like, I never would have guessed.
No, not at all. He seems almost thuggish in a good way, though.
Yeah. And he's awesome too, because like he kind of came in and like really parachuted in for like 3 days, and then there's like 9 days of stunt guy. You know, like Kevin or Casey Hendershot, who was our wonderful stunt Lowell, who shot like, you know, almost as much of the character as is the screen time, you know. And so it was kind of a weird balance, but Kevin was just able to parachute in and had like such a specific, like, I know how to do this. And I guess he gets asked to play like, you know, these sadistic kind of like horrible criminal types a lot. And he says no all the time. And then, and so we were kind of like relieved because he's like, you know, I've been trying my whole career not to play these sort of guys, but I figured this would be the time to do it because it's kind of spun a little bit and you're kind of
at the joke. Right?
Yeah, totally. And so he got the sense of humor of it, and he's a big hockey fan. So that's positive.
So was the characterization of his serial killer written into the script, or was that all Kevin kind of coming up with it on set?
No, it's definitely written like that. Like actually, like Lowell was kind of a sillier character. He actually brought some more darkness to it than is on the page, I would say, because like even in like the second draft, the first draft we did, like they actually took Lowell around and like forced him like under duress to murder people. And it just ended up kind of creating this like weird sort of like set pieces where he has like a shock collar and like, you know, they're like,
it's like Fido or something.
They're like, you need to go in there and kill this guy kind of thing. And it ended up that they're much sicker than he is. And it just removed them from the action in a weird way. So we ended up kind of, poo-pooing that.
Were there certain horror movies you guys were as in the writing and reference that you love? I mean, obviously we're talking about Scream and Heathers came up, but were other movies that you were like guys were drawing inspiration from as you went?
Yeah, I mean, in the writing process a little bit, we talked about that, but like, I mean, more in like the directing when I was trying to explain it to people, you know, it also got kind of weird because I'd be like, hey guys, you seen Prom Night 2? And they'd be like,
hey, we talk about that movie all the
Hello,
time.
Mary Lou.
Yeah, that's one of our favorites here.
and that was shot in Edmonton where we both went to school.
Canadian.
So we're very proud of that.
It's actually a really funny movie.
It is.
it's hilarious.
It's so
Very original.
good.
Yeah, well, and there's this weird thing that that are like in that movie, like all of the characters, like their last names are like very obvious, like horror director, like Mr. Carpenter, you know,
Yeah,
kind
really
of
on the
thing,
nose,
Mr. Henenlotter, you know.
Yeah.
And so we wanted, we have like a little bit of a nod to that in that like. We have Mrs. Kent, who's like Jennifer Kent, you know, like.
I noticed you had a lot of winks in this, where I mean,
That's
you had
modern.
like direct references where it was like Dario Argento or Argento, where you're directly talking about people, but there was a lot of other winks.
There's a Hooper couple and
Yeah.
Cunningham. I see some recognizable names.
Totally. There's, you know, and I didn't want to get too, you know, first year of film school about it, but like it was, like we realized that something that worked with Patchwork was that it kind of ended up being a bit of a movie that got non-horror fans interested in horror. So like, you know, people would like these hardcore, like, you know, like really gothed out dudes would go and we'd be like, yeah, it was okay kind of thing. But their girlfriends would be like, yeah, it was great. You know, like, and they'd be like, you know, super excited about it. And so we thought, well, this could be a bit more of like a way in for people. And
I totally saw it when I watched it for the Knoxville Horror Film Festival. I totally saw it as a crossover movie in that way. I was actively thinking like, oh, I could imagine film students that I knew who aren't into horror suddenly liking this movie more than even the horror fans, and maybe, you know, something they could share, which was interesting that you say that.
Yeah, totally. And so we ended up putting some references in there that are like, you know, too obvious for the hardcore horror fan, but like maybe like if you look it up and you're like, you haven't seen Cannibal Holocaust, you know, you might want to go check it out, or Martyrs, you know?
Yeah, there was a Cannibal Holocaust death scene, wasn't there? Yeah, that was
Pretty
like
amazing.
a direct visual there.
And part of it is, as a lazy screenwriter, like you're coming out with character names all the time, so it's just easier to make a reference to somebody else. It just saves so much time.
That's very cool. Well, all right. So let's we're gonna get real here for a moment, because I need you guys to help me solve my problem as an old man.
Okay.
And talking with you guys is helping already. Everyone I know across the board loves this movie. I should love this movie. It is literally, it's like you made a movie for me. All these, clicking all my boxes, the slash thing.
That was
whatever.
my first thought when I saw this movie. I was like,
All of
oh, this
them.
will be
Rob
Rob's
is
favorite
gonna
of the year.
love
This is going to be your
this
favorite movie of the year.
one.
And for some reason, and I think it might be because of who I am in my life right now, or maybe I'm going through some deep things now.
He's
and,
old and pissed off
I
at
have-
social networks.
And I am. I hate social media, and I fear the girls in this movie because I know a lot of young girls that I think are complete sociopaths and could easily do this. But I was bothered by the film. It really bothered me. And I know it's supposed to be a horror comedy, and not only that, but a dark comedy. And so I almost felt like there was something wrong with me, that I morally, and again, I know it's not meant to, we're not supposed to side with these girls, technically. But, you know, maybe I've worked with people in these very halls that I saw as these girls that might get the wrong message about this movie. And so I was very conflicted by the end of it. And I want to work it out with you guys. I want to know why. Why am I conflicted? Because I love Heathers. All right. And this feels like a modern version of Heathers for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely satire. Like, you know, like anybody who's like, looks at it in a very surface level in terms of like, well, these characters are killing people, and therefore the movie is telling me to kill people. You know, like that. Like I don't know what to do with that. Like, you know, just because the tone is so exaggerated that I don't really see. I mean, it's the same people, you know, don't see Starship Troopers as like, oh, this is over the top, you know, like with something to say, you know? And
Who joined the army after watching Starship Troopers?
Badass.
Fight them bugs.
Yeah, and I do realize that there is a bit of like a, you know, like a, I hope minority of the population that would like, you know, look at Wolf of Wall Street and think like, oh, that's cool, you know, like.
Oh, there definitely is. I've seen that film with some people who are like, oh yeah, that looks like a fun. I mean, it has its comeuppance pretty clearly.
Yeah,
you know,
totally. So like, I mean, you know, like, and we made kind of a decision to kind of like, you know, really, you know, go for it. And the movie is kind of structured like that, like, where it's like, oh, we're having fun, and you're sort of overlooking more and more as you go, and then you get to a point where it gets real, you know, like, and we were hoping that at the, I mean, we're getting really spoilery here. I assume so.
Mild spoilers for those of you that haven't seen it yet. How about that?
Yeah, like by the point that they actually like hang her boyfriend and burn the entire school down and kill everybody. like
all right, not mild spoiler, major spoiler.
Like that's that's the point you're supposed to be like, oh, that's too far, because it's like,
and you know what, and that's how I felt. That's right. and maybe that's a success as a horror movie. Because that's the thing, horror pushes you over. Like, I don't watch Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer as a fun movie.
Yeah, no,
I just think, oh, that's kind of fucked up, and that's horror to me. Mm-hmm. So I think that's what it is because it's intended to be kind of a comedy, and I'm supposed to be having fun. When it gets to a moment like that pushes too far, I'm almost like, uh-oh, that's a little too far for me, and I don't know how I feel about that.
Totally. And so, like, it is supposed to kind of be a little challenging. Like, I'm hoping that people don't stop having fun because you're supposed to be like, oh, you're just supposed to stop and think for a minute. Because then it kind of changes a little bit, and it starts to kind of introduce the jokes again. And then we kind of end on the, the sort of driving off in the sunset. And it's... and it's back to being like it's playing it as if it's like high energy and uplifting and a happy ending, but it's not. It's meant to be like kind of ironic that they sort of move past and through that. And it's been like even though they're getting away with it, and that's supposed to be kind of funny in an ironic way versus funny in a literal way. Like, yeah, they got away with it.
Yeah. Okay.
There was like a sharp turning point for me. Like it was funny up until the teacher. And that's when I was suddenly like, oh, shit, this just got real. Because the other ones, they were trying to cover tracks. There was definitely a method to the madness. And that one, it was just like, slash with machete. And there was nothing left, or it was an axe or something like that.
Yeah,
sledge. So it was far more brutal. It was visceral. And there was like a no holds barred thing. Whereas the other ones, and the other ones had a comedic pacing, like with the water bottle and trying to get him to take a sip. And then the way that the whole thing kind of played out, it was far more comedically paced.
Having a reminder that the violence is real to me is like actually the moral thing to do. It's like you treat violence as like, remember how I used to always complain about The Following, that show The Following?
Oh yeah,
because life was meaniness. Stab,
we
die,
killed 15 people this episode. No one means anything.
But it's interesting to portray it like as comic and then show something real where you feel, oh, I didn't like the way that felt suddenly. I think that's a very interesting style.
Well, here's the thing, and I'm sure on subsequent viewings I will see it different because you never know how you're going to react the first time you see a movie, right? Yeah. You're just kind of going along for the ride. I think what was supposed to be funny in the first half, the way these girls were acting, especially with social media and stuff, I was like kind of nervously laughing. I was like, I don't really find that funny. This is a little too close to home. I know too many people. I knew too many girls this age that are acting like this.
If I could,
I'm scared they're going to kill me.
If I could psychoanalyze you for a moment.
Yes, please do. This is half the show is psychoanalyzing me.
I think factor one is just a generational dread that you have, and that we're all, and I'm afraid too. Like I see, 17-year-olds with cell phones. I walk the other way. I don't want to know what's going on.
Young people today, am I right?
Yeah. They're on the internet. Who knows what they're doing? But secondly, it's that, and this was something in the makeup of the story from the get-go, is that we got you to like two best friends who have to be serial killers more than the people that they murdered. And it's a weird thing in your stomach. You feel like, I'm glad they did it. Like, but you're not really. Like, intellectually, you know that what they're doing is wrong, but you're really happy that they're still friends. Like, that's what you mostly cared about.
That's true. That's what you're rooting for the whole movie.
Well, and that's like part of our, like, the experiment of it is like, you want to try and challenge these assumptions you have. Like, how far are you willing to like ignore your moral compass?
Right.
In favor of like a frivolous friendship. And the point is quite far.
Well,
and for you, less far.
And you went out of your way to establish that these are not completely horrible, mindless killers. Like, it's not like
But they're completely horrible.
But, she still cooks dinner for her dad every night. And the Brianna character still obviously loves her parents and, is home and tells them where she's going to be. And, I mean, they're still, like, good students. And on the cheerleading squad, they're still, still have social cues that would indicate things other than serial killer.
Well, totally, and that's like part of the fun of it is trying to give those cues because they're supposed to build up like, oh well, I like them because they're funny, and part of what I wanted to do in a stupid way is like really try and test that, like how far are you willing to go with this, like. And, once you get to the point where it actually gets too much, like, then it kind of reminds you that there is, start to think about things like, well, maybe my experiencing violent things, like real violent things through media, disassociates me from the fact that they're really violent things. And that's the
social
whole point.
media. And like,
social media
why is that important? Like, why is it so important to them? Like, if you step back to go, well, but what actually is a like? What does it mean to suddenly have a big following on Instagram? Like, if you actually step back, it really is who the fuck cares? But when you're in it, the zeitgeist of that feeling of that these are characters, and I see this with a lot of people and probably all of us to an extent, how you start to value yourselves through this media. And I think that is a scary idea. And I think you're almost touching on like Black Mirror territory, even though your tone is very different. A little bit like the one with Ron Howard's daughter, where she's
a little bit.
Oh, the likes. You're fighting for the likes,
but only in that kind of surface level. But it's interesting. They both open up. I mean, what would be cool about a movie like that is less someone like Rob, who's not defining himself necessarily by social media, but a young girl who actually has been and uses Instagram and then sees that movie or watches it on fucking Snapchat, if it was streaming on Snapchat, how they would react to that mirror, whether it would see a mirror or whether it just seemed like a bad joke to them. I'd be fascinated.
I told Rob before the show started that for me, it felt like a celebration of narcissism, and that it's definitely humorous in that, but that it's celebrating these narcissistic characters. And it's very much like Jawbreaker, because Jawbreaker had that same quality where you were presented. The character who was telling the story, Jawbreaker, was a very weak narrator. You get from the get-go that she's kind of just like a very weak person. And then the other three that you're presented with as your protagonists are just horrible narcissists. So,
thank you for saying that about me.
As card-carrying narcissists, we want to give as much screen time as possible.
Not that you guys were narcissists, but that the actual film is a total celebration.
No, I think they are.
Yeah.
Part of that is like actual, like psychological things, like people who are psychopaths. But I mean, part of what growing up, like my mother's a psychologist, and then went later in her career like a forensic psychologist. So there's a lot of abnormal psychology stuff floating around that kind of give me my love of like true crime and things like that. And they we make a pretty specific, like breadcrumb trail for like the McDonald triad and stuff like that, which is like the three telltale signs that you're a psychopath, like killing animals and bedwetting and and
starting fires.
Yeah, starting fires.
Did she throw the terminology around the house like you're being passive aggressive now, or like?
Oh, we don't need to get into that.
We started with his psychoanalysis.
Let's turn the tables here, please, Chris. Psychoanalysis.
Sure. Yeah.
No one wants to look too deeply into the parents in this movie, but it's
that's pretty funny.
But part of it too, and this just came to me, but. I think culturally we're more accepting of male protagonists, like Breaking Bad. We're okay with watching that guy descend into darkness, but we're not used to seeing sort of poppy friendly teenagers descend into that same road. So I think it's something that is also part of the juxtaposition of it that we wanted to do, because that's fun and interesting that people are. It should make you uncomfortable that these very bright high school kids have dedicated their whole lives to something horrible.
There's whole threads about Get Out, about the white girl, the girlfriend, and they're like, well, she was hypnotized too, right? And it's like,
yes.
No, she's a horrible human being. Why is that so hard to accept?
Well, that's a huge thing. I mean, if you look at the percentages, the amount of male killers that we see on screen compared to the females, I mean, it's seriously like 1% versus 99%. It's huge. And I said on a couple of years ago when we were doing one of the Women in Horror events that we will not see true equality in horror films until we see equal number in the killers. And to this day, people are very uncomfortable seeing female killers. They are either psycho bitches from the get-go, something more like Carrie, where, they're mentally unhinged from the start, and then something snaps, and then they go full psycho. But to have somebody who seems normal but just has kind of a slightly off tendency, or in this case, just, kills people in their spare time but doesn't tell anybody, is like a weird thing to be able to take a bite of.
No, and totally. And one thing we thought was super important was just the fact that often, people kind of are like, well, it's a complex female character. She's doing some active things, but the movie has no interest in being in their actual perspective, because point of view drives movies, 100%. And so if we're going to have our main characters and have a more objective point of view, that's how we got the whole style of the movie is things are moving poppy fast, they're flowing. Every single transition in the movie was shot to be cut the way it's cut. And that's just because we thought that they would kind of fall like dominoes to them, kind of like, oh yeah, just the day, blah blah blah. You know,
you literally have one falling like a domino where the character follows them down to the floor.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of like whip pans and stuff like that because we thought it should be like colorful and fast, and like keep that pace that is in their minds. Like I said, they're a little ADD. And so it informs all the aesthetic choices because that's a firmer way of reinforcing their character through the style of the film. And I feel there's a lot of like, it leads to kind of these very like, well, it's a badass character, and and then they have nothing to do with the actual like plot or anything like that, and it's just because they're anyway, I think there's a lot to be said for like making strong choices with your point of view to support your main characters.
Yeah, and having protagonists who get to be in the driver's seat of their own story, like that was the whole drive behind the Sadie and Michaela.
Yeah. Have you guys come across other like views like Rob's? Like, have you, or has it mostly been like the reverse? Because I'm just guessing. That's not to be gendered, but I'm guessing this will be actually a really popular film with women. But I don't know. I would just guess that. Like,
generally speaking, it's been well received. Like critics wise, or critically rather, and a lot of positive like fan feedback. But yeah, we definitely have encountered people who like don't tune into the satire as much, or are thinking that we didn't intend satire. So like, and that's, and I get that, like if it's, if we're,
you're staring straight into my eyes. Listen, guys, I'm not knocking the film in any way, shape, or form.
No.
I think everybody should see it for sure.
I'll hold him back.
I think, I'm thinking about this honestly, and I think, and this is what's gonna, I think, stand the test of time for your film really is, we're in fucking scary times right now, man. And a lot of it has to do with social media and the way that we're getting our information, whether it's things politically or just the culture now of how, we were talking off air before about just how quick people are to accuse and demonize people before. It's just, if you say something negative about somebody, that person's life is over, regardless of if anything happened with it or not. And so there, I guess just deep down, there's a little bit of fear in general about how crazy the world's getting. And this is probably the first horror movie in the last several years that I think really hits that, the way that social media plays into things, them being so obsessive over getting all these likes on Instagram over following a horrible murder. And I think that's what's hitting me in a weird way. It's the first movie that I think is a little too close to home with what's really happening.
Well, we also have our first president who also is kind of like them. He actually understands the world through his social media and his bubble.
Totally.
Yes. Which is scary. It's a scary time to be in.
Well, and that's actually funny because we wrote it in like we shot in 2016, and so there's actually like a line in there that's like, real news is based on facts, not hashtags. And I was like, well, that's not true anymore.
Really, no.
That's funny.
But just in terms of like social media, like it is interesting that we live in a time where you can you can affect millions of people in a very short amount of time, and the speed of communication that it can travel. And for us who are born in the 80s, that's really bizarre. Growing up in the 90s, where you had the dial-up connection tone, like and now
Dad, don't pick up the phone. I'm on the line. There was a huge fucking thing in my household where Dad would like pick up the phone, and it'd kick me off, and I couldn't talk on InstaChat anymore, and yeah.
But I can relate to that, but we've been taking meetings off of this movie in the last little while, and we'll get pitched projects occasionally that are internet based horror movies, and it doesn't quite work the same if it is all about the internet. Like if the plot and the character are 100% internet. It's not quite what we did with Tragedy Girls, and I think that's because like the internet is just a carrot in our story, as opposed to being the whole movie.
Yeah, your people are defining themselves through their use of social media. It's not about social media. It's about the people. It maybe we're also in a point where we don't know what to fill that vacuum. What are we meant to believe in? Like it's largely agnostic kind of population. Like what are people going to believe in if it's not social media? And we think we're connected, but we're less connected.
I don't know, guys. I think we've gone too far. I don't think there's turning back now.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and I think that's part
Haven't you
of.
seen the end of Escape from L.A.?
Does not matter.
Push a button and all the lights go out.
Does not matter. Seriously, like
No, that's
when
gonna
I
happen.
see, like, because I teach at USC, when I see my freshmen and the way that they are on their phones, it is literally everything. It's everything, and so I just don't see us going back now.
Yeah, and all this change has come so quickly. Like, and that's I mean, really, it's. I mean, Tragic Girls is a cautionary tale. Like as, so like we're hoping that people think twice about it and tune into that, but. It's a fine line between people actually getting it and just adding more fuel to the fire, I'm sure.
And if anyone wants to contact me on Twitter about the Non-Technology Collective, I'm starting in the woods. They're welcome to join.
I think Rob will join you.
I
as
mean,
well.
I missed the 90s, man.
He's getting close.
Because I mean, like in the 90s, we were still online. There was still a
Barely.
presence.
No, there was a little bit of method to the madness.
There was
if you
the
will.
chat room.
So you guys
we
are
used to
doing
do all the
Unfriended
time.
too,
Yeah.
obviously. Let's just talk about LinkedIn, the movie that you're working on for Blumhouse. I want to go. I'm just curious, way back early horror influences, because we always love to hear about like the films that get people hooked as kids. That's something we're all pretty much obsessed by. It's the reason we're probably all in this room. What were some of those movies for you guys?
Well, for me, it was like a lot of I mean, we didn't actually have cable growing up. Like, I grew up in a small town, like 4,000 people kind of thing, but it had like 3 video stores, and one of them was in the back of like a waterbed store. It was really weird.
Oh man, that's the weirdest porn section ever. There's like a waterbed in the porn section.
Don't
Just like,
sit on
yes.
any of those water beds, man.
It was dicey. But my older brother was very into horror, so he kind of got me kind of early, like 6 or 7. And my dad had a fight with a cable guy at some point there, so we didn't have cable, so we literally would just watch movies.
Yeah.
And so we would always have to rent 5 movies for 5 days for $5, and he would get to pick 3 because he was older, and I would pick 1 action and 1 comedy, and he would pick 3 horror movies. And so I got this disproportionate horror love early,
You literally owe him a career now.
Is he totally jelly that you're like directing horror films now?
I mean, he did like a PhD in philosophy, so he likes to argue about everything. So I mean, he's probably I don't really argue with him much. But he's still a horror fan, still a big horror fan, and very supportive of horror movies, which is cool. Yeah. But anyway, so I ended up watching like a lot of like full moon movies.
Oh, weird.
And which is, and we're also in Canada, so it's like the land of Cronenberg, like a lot of scanners and dead ringers and stuff, so we ended up, I ended up watching a lot of those. And then like the first thing that really blew my mind was like Evil Dead, and Evil Dead 2.
Yeah.
Because like just trying to explain those to people and being like, guys, like you got to watch this great movie. And then I'd bring people over and show it to them, and like 20% of them would get it. Yeah. And I'd be like, no, you don't understand. Like, this is brilliant. Isn't that crazy that they did, and then you hear like the stories like through the very dial up internet about like, oh, it was just a bunch of kids who made this. What do you mean? Like, and that kind of, you can make movies and live, and so you start to kind of go off on that path yourself.
Yeah, for me, I'm going to drop a bombshell on you guys. Like, I didn't grow up like a big horror fan from the get-go.
Get out.
I'm sorry.
I'm with Rob now.
Alex.
I'm changing my vote.
I turned the room. It was always kind of like I'd be watching something that was like horror adjacent that I didn't know was horror. So like the scariest thing I ever saw when I was like 5 was this movie called Return to Oz.
Oh, yeah.
It's terrifying.
It had
That is
Mombi
terrifying.
the witch and her headless collection or bodiless collection of heads and the Wheelers, and there was
it's got
that
creepy
weird
imagery.
rock thing at the end that died from eggs. Yeah, there was some weird shit in that movie.
Even you just mentioning some of those characters gave me like goosebumps, because it's just like I being traumatized by that film, because my parents were like, yeah, it's a sequel to Wizard of Oz, so go nuts.
Oh, no, it's not. There's
No.
actually a really fascinating story behind that film, which I won't drag everybody down with today because it's not exactly horror, but how the guy got to make it and
Walter
everything.
Murch.
Yeah, the
It's
greatest
totally
editor of
a
all
wild
time.
fucking story.
Well, possibly
editor,
How he
yeah.
got that approved and everything. Because, it's intense and it's really surrealistic and it's kind of an acid trip. And the whole headless thing fucked me up when I was a kid, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's starring like a 10-year-old girl, so it's
And
like,
do you remember the premise to it?
Frieza Balk, actually,
So
from
Frieza Balk plays Dorothy, and it's her aunt and uncle are trying to convince her that everything that she remembered from the original Oz was all bullshit she made up in her mind. So they're having her committed, and they're trying to do electrotherapy on her and electrocute her while there's a power outage and a lightning storm. And then she ends up drowning, and that causes her to go back into the land of Oz.
I always wonder what happened at that hospital after she escaped. Like, oh man, we really wanted to kill another kid tonight, But
they actually say at the end, because she says what happens to the doctor, and then Auntie M is like, he didn't make it. He was trying to save one of his machines and he died. And so they actually say he died in it. So yeah,
bizarre.
it's some morbid shit.
Yeah. So I mean, starting with that at a young age, which I guess is not a horror film, but it would always be something that was a little off key, and I just had one channel growing up too, so it was like whatever was on that syndicated Canadian back channel would be like, the Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie, and then I'd watch that, and all the kids would go to school, and everybody talked about it because everybody had one channel. But it would always be like you'd get your horror with a dose of comedy, and I think that it has affected me to this day.
And you were pretty Christian.
Wow.
I mean, well, not you, but like the town.
The town. I mean, I grew up with religious friends, and like we're still friends to this day, even though like we don't agree on everything. But that's fine. Like we're all in a magical rainbow. But like we watched The Exorcist on Halloween like once, and to watch that in the context of like having religious friends is like terrifying. Even though like other people might be like, oh, The Exorcist is fine. There's bee noises and whatnot. But for us that was a very special thing. And as well as like science fiction that also had like horror that you weren't expecting, like Event Horizon, something like that would really freak me out.
The weird hell scene that occurs that like for 5 minutes, it's like completely, it's like Hellraiser for
those
5 minutes.
quick cuts of people who are like naked and covered in blood, and you're like,
can you imagine what's on the cutting floor if that made it into the movie?
Oh my gosh.
Like you're watching that movie going, wait a minute, there's some fucked up shit in that.
Fucking insanity not in there.
That's kind of great. And Sam Neill.
Yes, of course.
Who we've already talked about today.
Yeah, he's going to come up.
Go Sam Neill.
He comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Do you guys keep up with modern horror trends? Because I know this was probably a festival film, so you guys probably got to travel, and that's a fun part of this, I imagine, meeting other filmmakers and seeing new stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, between Patchwork and Tragic Girls, we got to meet a lot of good horror people really quickly, like Joe Bigos and like Jackson Stewart and actually Jeremy Garner was supposed to be in Tragedy Girls.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he was supposed to be.
Wow, what was Jeremy supposed to be?
He was supposed to be the guy who like pulls up when they're killing Josh Hutcherson in the ditch, and he's supposed to be like, hey, what's going on, kind of thing. And it was like meant to be sort of like a little bit loose and a little improv-y because that's kind of Jeremy's
thing. Yeah,
and
he's my favorite moment in Spring because of that when he's like, I'm not sleeping in your dead mom's bed.
Yeah, that's a great line.
And he's super funny. So like we flew. He was like living in Minneapolis at the time or something. So he came out to set, and and I was like, you're going to do this. We got him a wardrobe and everything, and then we just got like one of our condors is like a big light. Essentially, they used to light night exteriors. It like the ground is so soft because it's so humid in Kentucky that like it slid into the ditch and like tipped over. And so we were like, oh shit, that's like 4 hours. So we lost like a huge chunk of our shooting day to that. And then so I'm like trying to like get through things and make it work and stuff. And then it became apparent, I'm like, oh, I have to cut something, and I have to cut Jeremy. And so I was like, Jeremy, can you hang out an extra day and we'll pick this up kind of thing? He's like, I have to go back, like I have to work or something, and I was like, oh, fuck. And so I ended up, like, he flew home, like, we essentially just flew out to Kentucky to have barbecue lunch with us. Yeah. But, like, it didn't work out, and then so our first AD ended up taking the part. But,
has he spoken to you since?
We've texted briefly. Okay. But yeah, like, I'm sure he's just like, what the fuck? But I was stoked to have him. It just didn't
so Battery fans. Yeah. You're definitely Battery fans.
I'm a huge Battery fan.
Yeah, we're a big fan.
Yeah,
I love Jeremy.
We definitely push that on our show, and Joe and Jackson have both been guests as well on here.
Yeah. And I mean, but it's been cool like doing the festival circuit. Like I just came back from France and saw a bunch of
Oh wow!
What festival did you do in France?
It was Gérardmer, which is it's in Germany, but it's like the France like Fantastic Film Festival.
Oh wow!
But it was it's like the 25th year there, but it's been going on for like 47 years. But it was a premiere of Pascal
Anguilla.
Yeah, his Instant Ghostland. So we got to see that, and it won all the awards. which is great. But it's cool. It's like brutal and punishing in a similar way. But
like
just
French Extreme, more for extreme.
yeah, like a little bit more accessible, maybe. Okay. But and so meeting that guy was super cool. Because
can we put that on the poster? More accessible than even Martyrs.
And the thing is, like, there's a Martyrs reference in Tragedy Girls. Like flat out, like one character.
Mention it.
That made me laugh out loud. Actually.
And I just love the idea that someone would like two high school kids would be like lending that movie to each other.
Yes,
and just know that's sacred here because we are in the place that remade Martyrs.
But
not really.
Nobody.
Really.
I'm going to call them on it.
Not really.
Anyway.
Yeah, and so it was cool to see because I went up and talked to him and he like knew about that reference because people had told him about it.
So
and
cool.
So it was super cool.
That's pretty funny.
But yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of.
That's really neat.
Oh, have any of you guys seen Tigers Are Not Afraid?
No, that was at Screamfest, and everyone was telling
Spanish
me
film?
about that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, premiered at Screamfest and it played with us at Deadfest, and we also played Screamfest too. But that movie is a Mexican horror movie. It's kind of like sort of a Pan's Labyrinth vibe.
Oh.
See that movie.
Okay.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I heard
cool.
that one was really cool.
Is it out yet or not? We have to wait for the festival.
I have no idea what the release plans are, but it's still touring festivals. But that movie is like next level amazing.
Wow.
Like we were at a very emotional screening of that movie, and people connect to that in quite a visceral way.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I think it won Screamfest as best film.
Yeah, it definitely won Screamfest.
Yeah. Tigers Are Not Afraid.
Now, do you guys already have your next gig lined up from this? Because I assume this opened a lot of doors quickly.
Yeah, we wrote a project on spec last year called Nightlight, which ended up selling to Sony Pictures, which
surely you've heard of them.
Yeah, but I mean we were.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't something that we expected because we designed it as like a kind of more of a chamber piece and smaller like our other movies. That's being produced through Unique Pictures with Vince Gatewood and Bob Shea.
Oh, cool.
Who we
so
got
the new company, their new company that they bought.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been around for a while now, but yeah, it's Bob Shea, obviously,
Yeah, not New Line.
Yeah,
It's not New Line company. Yeah.
So we got to chat with him a bit, and he's got like one of the swords from Lord of the Rings on his wall.
Nice.
Cool.
Yeah, and we were like, who does that belong to? And he's like, well, I don't know, it's one of them, but you make these movies and then they give you a gift at the end, but you paid for the gift, so
That's funny.
Wow.
And what about directing though? Because that your one you're not directing?
Yeah. No, I'm directing that one.
Oh, cool.
Oh, very
okay.
So it'll be in theory the first studio movie, and we're working on some other odds and ends. But,
Cool.
Very
Cool.
cool.
Exciting. Yeah. So, well, I mean, I hope people saw Tragedy Girls before this.
Yeah.
We will make sure we
You
push.
could just skip that one, 2-minute part where we talk about the end.
And
but
it's
that's fine.
not. It doesn't blow the movie by any means. So.
Again, it's not a movie that's just about the twist, really. I mean, to be honest, I think it's more an advertising. Like watching, because I saw the film at Knoxville, it was a while back now, and so when I looked at the trailer to kind of refresh before getting here, I was like, I wish there was a way you could cut a trailer to this that wouldn't show they actually committed a murder at the start. And I know it'd be really hard, but it would be, to me, I watched it knowing nothing about the movies, and that opening moment is actually a surprise. Like I was like, oh shit, okay, that spun me around.
Yeah, no, totally. And I believe me, I would rather there be a little more nuance to some of the marketing and stuff. But I think that's a common affliction.
Our producing partners here, Armin and Cam, just nudged me to mention that we're potentially we cannot confirm or
laughing about
we cannot confirm or deny that we might be doing a Tragedy Girls TV spinoff, but that's still very much in the works.
Ooh, nice. Very cool.
Very, very cool.
Well,
so you cannot confirm, but you did bring it up. So take that what you will, social media.
I cannot plug nor yet not plug.
Okay, fair enough.
So how did we do, Rob? Did we convince you, or
I think,
any
look,
more
to
divided?
rewatch
Listen,
in a couple, give it a month.
I am a physical media addict, and so I will buy Tragedy Girls for my collection. Absolutely. 100%.
No, but I think watch it again. I do.
I do. I think it's a big part of it is your initial reaction to a movie and kind of trying to come to, look, I mean, some of my favorite horror movies I don't watch all the time because, you want to maintain that experience. And so, I definitely want to watch it again, but I'll probably give it a little bit of time.
Yeah.
It's like when I buy a new album, I listen to it and then I don't listen to it for like a month. And then when I listen to it a month later, I'm like, oh, I love this song. I forgot about this album. So
sometimes it's like what Von Trier says, a film should be a pebble in the shoe. It should kind of get under your skin a bit. I had that experience with certain movies growing up, that especially Cronenberg movies, not the horror stuff, the letter stuff, seeing like Crash or something in the theater or Dead Ringers, where I instantly kind of revolted the film. And there's something about it. And then as I grew older, I was really drawn to those same things that put me off, and I realized, it's something in me I don't understand yet. I'm kind of scared of, or just confused about. And I wouldn't be surprised if I wouldn't say this about most films with you. This is really based on knowing your taste. That I think.
And I love every element of it. I think the actors you got are terrific, and I like everything about it. I just was trying to get to the bottom of why it struck a chord with me, and I think it's just the girls remind me too much of.
Then that could be a great thing. That could be a real positive.
And I don't want them to murder me.
Yeah.
So
just watch it with the audio commentary on. Then it'll feel like Tyler and I are in the room with you.
Just literally
talking. I need that to happen. I need you guys to watch the movie with me. So I'm going to put on the commentary and feel like you're with me.
Cool. Yeah. I like the cinematic shrink. That's the first time we've had an episode like this. I think cinematic shrink. Trying to get
cinematic shrinking.
Well, the closest we got was Greg McLean, who did Wolf Creek.
Cool.
Oh, yeah.
Because I like Greg a lot, and I think he's a terrific filmmaker. But I said, I saw Wolf Creek when it came out, and it really got to me. And then I rewatched it right before he came on. And again, I respect the filmmaking craft, and I think it's a great movie, but I never want to watch it again.
No, I will never.
And so we talked about
Wolf
that,
Creek.
and he's like, "Well, that's the point. It's that's the kind of horror it is that you shouldn't feel comfortable with anything in there or that character and stuff." So I like being. I think it's just a much more interesting interview or chat. Conversation to have if we talk about why these things affect us the way they do, rather than being like, "Oh, it's great and everything's great."
Yeah, so, I prefer to have a knife fight in a phone booth as well.
So next week we're going to have the director of Microwave Massacre, so I can go toe to toe. I think that is the
You
worst.
guys need to hash it out. I think. Yeah.
We call the Cloverfield people. Just go with that.
You heard the opening of our show, the new Cloverfield movie. Anyways,
well, I will end by saying I really do. I do think it's a terrific movie, and I think it's the irony of some of this is actually that on paper it's everything I don't look for in a horror film. I'm definitely looking for like Lovecraft and weird, dark.
I don't
but
like
when
slashers,
I saw it,
and I loved it.
But everything about it like surprised me, and I think so. I think all the things that if it was on paper, what you're telling me what this movie's about, that would probably make me go, And then when I watched it, every beat surprised me, and I think that's why I appreciated the sense of humor in it so much. So it might just be different sets of expectations. You know? I think people are going to have a blast.
Yeah, so far, everything I've heard, people are loving it so far. So it's available now on VOD, iTunes, Blu-ray.
Check out Tragedy Girls.
Turek, who's not here, is also a fan.
Huge fan of it. And thank you guys so much for coming down.
Thanks for having us.
I know it was a little weird scheduling things, but we're happy we were able to work it out.
Yeah, definitely us too.
That was great.
We look forward to Nightlight.
Thank you very much. So,
and the thing that's not happening,
and their first film, Patchwork, is on Netflix, right?
Yeah,
So I haven't seen that one, so I'm gonna check it out for sure.
And on iTunes if you're more inclined to pay for it, but I don't really know why. But check it out. It's a similar thing, but more of a Reanimator kind of Mad Scientist vibes.
Done deal. All righty, guys. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.